Amidst our greater themes of preparation and expectation during Advent, which we often look outwardly for, we must remember that there's always primarily an inward participation with the invitation God has made to us over time and right now. In the first reading, Jerusalem, meant as a proxy for God's people in some senses, is summoned upward in assent to God's call, in participation with the work God is doing by his assertion that they should buck up and remember what God can do and has promised his faithful ones. In the gospel, we see, so quick that you might miss it, that John the Baptist preaches baptism for the forgiveness of sins. That is, a moment when we fess up to our sinfulness and waywardness and express through ritual action that we can be cleansed to continue striving for a fuller and purer life than the squalor we had been living in amidst the thrall of sin. That is the baptism of John, not the baptism of Jesus. Both with Baruch and Luke, there's a prescribed action which points us to something down the line a bit. That is, something larger than ourselves and what we're on about on a day-to-day basis. Our lives are part of some larger work and effort, and those lives are directed toward that larger effort in order that we live in fullness and freedom, that is, in participation. I think we all understand that we've been endowed with free will by God. We also hopefully understand that it's by this free will, individually and collectively, that sin not only entered into the world, but that it's grown across and through the world through repeated and reinforced habitual and intentional action of choosing lesser and lesser goods rather than choosing better and better goods. That's not choosing a Mercedes over a Hyundai or choosing grass-fed beef over corn-fed beef. Metaphysically, in a general sense, a good is something that has existence, or something is good in that it has existence. All goods are aligned with their purpose, more or less. The less something is aligned with its purpose, the more it is deprived of good. God is the perfect good. He's also to whom we are aligned. Thus, we have free will toward or for something, not from something. Our free will gives us the option to assent to that alignment to God, our ordering to the perfect good. Who is God? The alternative is a privation of good unto death, and even further, if we reject God entirely, into what amounts to eternal damnation. Just as the fall of all men was the choice of the first men, the final fall of all of us is ours to make as well. To each of us is ours to make as well. You don't get to say whether or not I fall. That would be most unpleasant. Though God has tried over the centuries to help us look forward to salvation from sin and death. Enter Paul in the second reading. He's a fan of man, and especially to those who have been entrusted to him in spiritual care. That's why he writes to them and gives them encouragement and correction. He also embeds little love notes and actions in his writings, as we hear today. And this is my prayer, that your love may increase ever more and more in knowledge and every kind of perception, to discern what is of value, that you may be pure and blameless for the day of Christ, filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ for the glory and praise of God. That's a typical Pauline sentence and requires some breaking down. Paul knows about goods and choices and directing our lives toward something. He understands that our actions, that is, how we live our lives across all our moments, amount to participation in or rejection of the gifts offered to us from the Almighty. And so, essentially, he prays that we get it. He gives us a succession of linked hopes. Let's work backwards from the ultimate. The ultimate is, as he says, the glory and praise of God. He wants us to be able to do that and be for that, and so to do so, he wants us to be filled with fruit, not apples or pomegranates in a pie filling or as in a jelly donut, but the fruit that comes from something, righteousness. Where can we get this fruit always? Well, Paul tells us it comes from Jesus Christ. How? Jesus is righteous, as he is, and by his obedience to the Father, it's his righteousness that has gained for us eternal redemption. It's in him, in his body, that we have access to what comes from Jesus' righteousness, which is our salvation. Why do we need to be jam-packed with this fruit, which is salvation? Because on the day of Christ, when all are judged, we are to be known by our fruit. Our actions show that we understand our role in the body of Christ, and Jesus Christ himself is righteous. Thus, his whole participating body is righteous, the key being participation. Jesus presents his whole body, which is intended to be all men, all mankind, to the Father, for the purpose the Father has sent Jesus on a mission to fulfill: dwelling, abiding, eternal Sabbath rest, and peace. How are we jam-packed with the fruits of Jesus' righteousness? Paul reveals it in his prayer: to discern what is of value, which is a process. This is an ordering of goods, not the selecting of the best cantaloupe. So how can we better discern what is of value? Well, Paul's got us there too, by increasing our love. Does that mean that Paul wants us to increase our tolerance or our bedroom appetites? No. It means that he wants us to get better at willing the good of others. That is, not picking that which is of greater good in people, but to take the time and suffer the internal battle of helping to bring about other people becoming better and better in goodness. If you've never heard what willing the good of the other is, there you go, a definition. This is through demonstrating the right way to live, engaging in right worship, in being available in times of hardship and joy. It isn't about making someone feel good. It's about putting the work into relationships so that what results is good. This is what God has done for us, most visibly seen in the life and times of Jesus Christ. Paul wants that kind of increase so that we hone the practice of good making, both for ourselves and for each other. For it starts with ourselves in that we can't give what we don't have. But we're not exactly a finished product almost at any moment either. So we must work on humility so that we accept others working upon us. This is the kind of preparation we do in Advent. We look backwards from what our salvation is for, and we give thanks to God for his great glory in inviting us into it. We acknowledge and rejoice at the memory of God coming in the flesh, and we recognize it as a gift, a free gift. We prepare to know how to care for that gift and to extend it to others. In doing so, we participate on an entirely different level and receive an even greater gift, a participation in the work of our Father for which we were made. In the great economy of salvation, God's holy gifts for God's holy people, it shapes the people into a closer configuration to Him, who is the giver of all good gifts. And thus man, by God's gift and man's participation, can see God as He is and become like Him in His mercy and His generosity.